All right. Hit the red and blue button. Okay, so we'll get started with Drupal 101. So I'm supposed to start this. All right, let's start it, I think. All right, so welcome. I've been given the honor of starting off the conference with the very first talk, which just can be an introduction to Drupal. Just the very basics. So if you don't know what Drupal is, but you've managed to come here, then you're in the right place. Yeah, all right. I guess I should talk a little bit who I am. My name is David Pascoe-Deslauriers. I'm the CTO of Coldfront Labs. We're one of the platinum sponsors. So thanks to all the other sponsors, OpenPlus, Evolving Wed, Optapsy, and Pro7 Design. I'm not sure if Joseph's here yet. But yeah. So anything else? If anybody has any questions about anything or wants to say something, just put up your hand and interrupt me, and we'll try and answer the questions. I totally love doing that. So let's get started. So the first bit of foundational knowledge you need to understand Drupal is understanding content management. So what's content management? Well, without it, a website sort of is, and other systems are sort of like this. You have various URLs, and each of those URLs maps directly to a file. So if somebody goes to the site, they type in a URL, they get the file that matches that URL. Pretty simple, easy to manage, no problems at all. But as your website gets more complicated, maybe you want to have a page that lists all your websites. Maybe you want to have pages that have sort of other meta things. Then all of a sudden, every time you add something, it means you have to update this summary page. Or when things change and you put different kinds of content, it means that many files need to be updated because they're not really aware of each other. They're just, you have URLs that go to files. So a solution to this is to have a content management system. So content management system, instead of a URL going to a specific file, the URL is a question for the content management system. The content management system knows about all the content, and then you can ask it things about the content through URLs. So let's zoom in on our content management system that we've designed. So here's a content management system, and we've got 4 different pieces of content, and we've categorized them as different kinds of content. Content 1 and 3 are newsletters, and content 2 and 4 are events. So we have first newsletter, second newsletter, and then first event, second event. And these are all just pieces of content in our content management system. Because the content management system knows a bit about what these things are, you can ask it things. You can say, hey, can I have content 1? And the system will say, I know what content 1 is. It's first newsletter. And then you can ask it more complicated questions, because it knows this about your different files or your different pieces of content. You can ask, can I have a list of events? And because it knows everything that's an event, it can tell you all the events that are in the system. So inside, the other thing we can do to extend on the content management system is we can model the different kinds of content we have different ways. So we can say things like, we can have, in Drupal we call them different content types. But you can say that different types of things in your content management system have different models. They store different kinds of data. So a newsletter is different than an event. A newsletter has a title, so what newsletter it's a part of, the authors of the newsletter, and the text that's in the newsletter. And an event is different than a newsletter. It has a title, it has a start time, it has an end time, and it has a description of what the event is. So we can start breaking up our content in terms of different models that store different things. We can also classify our different content. We can tag it with different other terms or metadata. to track things. So we have different vocabularies of terms, so different ways that we're going to tag things, and different ways of classifying things. And then we can take, when we classify things, we can take different types of content and relate them together. For instance, here's our content management system again, with a vocabulary called track. So we're tagging it with a track now. And so we have a newsletter and an event both tagged in the track code. And then we have another newsletter and our event tagged with the track management. And with this information, a user can then ask our content management system, hey, I'd like to know everything about management. And the system knows this. It can then answer with, here's the content that is tagged with management. All right, so it's a bit of high view of what content management is and why you do, or what you can use it for. So what is Drupal? So Drupal is, I cannot take your call, Matt. Someone want to get a hold of him? Matt's the CEO of Cold Front, so probably shouldn't just hang up on him. So Drupal is a free and open source content management framework, as they call it. It is an extendable platform that you can use to build your content management system on. So it frequently is used as the base for building larger systems. Drupal by itself is not generally an out-of-the-box solution. And so you'll frequently see other applications that are sort of based on Drupal. The other thing about Drupal, it's written in PHP. And if there are PHP developers here, since Drupal 8, Drupal has essentially been a Symfony framework application. So if any Symfony developers in the audience wondering, some parts of the code will be very familiar. And then it needs to be backed up by a database where Drupal stores most of its content. And usually the database system used is MariaDB or MySQL. So Drupal at this point is getting old. It's well past the point of being able to drink in the United States. It started as a bulletin board system written by a university student in Belgium. And then in 2006, as the community started taking off around it to build other things, they formed a not-for-profit to own all the resources. And in 2008, the DrupalCon Inc. was formed to sort of manage events and conferences. And then in 2011, that became the Drupal Association, which controls sort of all the copyrighted and stuff in the Drupal project and the website and stuff. So since then, Drupal usage has just grown and grown and grown.
Microphone fixed.
Oh, okay, excellent.
Yeah,
that sounds good. That's all right. Oh, it's in the cupboard. It's a good hiding spot. All right. So, about Drupal and how to use it. Drupal, the focus of configuring and building your application is always that the configuration is done mostly in the GUI. So, for a lot of other frameworks. Oh, all right, perfect. Now I have to quiet down. For a lot of other frameworks and systems, they generally mean that you're going to be doing a lot of programming to make the system that you want on that framework. Drupal, the focus is that you set everything up in the system, in the website. So you install the site, and then you go in and configure the application that you're trying to build. This comes with a downside, because due to all these features, if you've not used Drupal before, there is a lot of stuff going on when you log into Drupal, and it can be a little overwhelming. The other thing about Drupal is that the features are written to be generic in the system, and then you configure the specific behavior that you want. The sort of side cause of this is in the Drupal world. Drupal loves using generic terms to mean specific things. So if you say views to someone in the Drupal community, that means something specific. That's a specific kind of thing. Same thing with like context, content, taxonomy. In Drupal, these are specific systems. It's just something that you have to you sort of adapt to when you're using Drupal to know exactly like what is being talked about. The other important thing about Drupal is it's very modular in its design. So you have to turn on when there's a set of features you want. You have to turn it on via the module. But that also means that there's a ton of community developed features that if you're setting up a Drupal application, you are definitely going to use that do almost limitless things that you can just enable, and they add that functionality to Drupal. It also means, and this is what's actually pretty good compared to a lot of other systems, if you want to add your own functionality, you can write your own modules. And all your custom code can be contained in just your module, and you don't need to change Drupal, and you don't need to change other people's modules. And so you have upgrade paths, which is awesome. Yeah, and I mentioned it before, due to the flexibility, Drupal is a great platform to quickly build web applications, and so you'll see it used for that in various places. All right, so modules, important thing to know. There's sort of two big classifications of modules, core and contrib. Core modules are the modules that come with Drupal. When you download Drupal, you get a bunch of modules that offer functionality. Those ones are core. They're maintained by the Drupal core team. The other set of modules are called contrib. They're hosted on Drupal.org, but they are written and maintained by members of the community. So you'll meet lots of people around here who probably maintain modules on Drupal.org, and all those modules are considered contrib or contributed modules. They need to be downloaded separately. Well, they just don't come with it. All right, so let's take a look at Drupal, what you get when you install it. So let's go to this tab. There we are. So this is what the newest version of Drupal looks like if you run the standard install. So the standard install sets up a bunch of stuff. Oh, and then log in. This is sort of the standard theme you get and what you see. So you have a default page that tells you, oh, you don't have any content. Oop, don't need that. I need another tab. So let's talk about finding your way around, because that's an important thing. There we are. Sorry, forget that I'm in using tabs. Once you've logged in, the most important part of Drupal is the bar, the bar at the top, the toolbar. It can be tucked away or tucked up, so if it's not there, you might need to click Manage. But these top-level menus are how you get to everything. And let me zoom in, because then you can actually read them. So the first menu is Content. And this is where you get to all the content that's created in the system, or how you can create more. So if we go to Content, it would have a list of all the content in the system. We can add content from here, and then we get a list of our different kinds, and then we can create new pieces of content. And if we do, might as well just do this quickly. There we are. We have some very boring content, but now when we go to Content, it's listed there. The next one, which is probably your first stop, if you've installed a new site and you're configuring something, is Structure. This is where you configure how everything works. This is where you configure your content types and everything else, block types. We'll talk about all these different stuff you can have, taxonomies, views when it's there, menus. All of this is configured here. Appearance is the next place, and this is where you manage your themes. The way Drupal works is that all the systems inside of Drupal don't make HTML. Internally, they make this thing called a render array, which can then gets templated out to HTML. The part that templates it out is the theme, and that happens at the very, very end of when Drupal makes a page. The reason for all this is because the theme is then, hopefully, disconnected from all the other functionality. So if you want to make Drupal look like whatever you want, you just need to write a theme, and that controls how all your pages are displayed and how they get templated into markup. And so you can have the same Drupal site and then change just by changing the theme, have it look completely differently, have it use completely different front-end frameworks, and all of that. Extend, another important place, which actually might be the first place that you visit the site when you know a bit more about what you're doing, because Extend is where you enable and disable modules. So all the different functionality that you can add via modules is listed here. So they are sorted by what is that, category? There we are. And then, so you have different functionality for different categories. If we scroll down, for a good example, if we want to enable multilingual and translation, because we want to support multiple languages, we have all the modules for supporting different kinds of multilingual. So if we wanted to have a multilingual site, we just turn them on and click Save. If we want to uninstall them, then we can go here, and that removes the functionality. Configuration is a massive page. Oh, it's not so bad because we don't have too much stuff enabled. Configuration fills up quick the more modules you add, because this is where you configure the functionality of the individual modules. So structure is for the structure of your content, controlling things about the content people will be creating on the site. Configuration is configuring how all the different modules and subsystems work. So things like the name of the site and how you want users to be handled, all kinds of the many other sort of back-end stuff that you need to configure in a big application is all handled here inside configuration. People is the user management portion of Drupal, because there's a full role-based access control system. You can have users, they can belong, you can create roles, and then you can assign permissions to those roles. So modules expose different permissions that when a user tries to do those things, it checks to see whether that user has a role that can do those things. And it can get fairly granular if we go through here. There's a lot of different permissions. So we only have four roles, but we have a lot of permissions for all these roles. This page can get a little big, but it means that we do have fairly granular permissions for things. And then getting to the end, we have reports. Reports is the different pages that tell you a bit about what's going on in your Drupal site. From the status report, which just does a bunch of self-checks on your configuration to see what's going on, to available updates to see if Drupal core or any modules have updates that need to be downloaded, recent log messages if you're trying to debug something, maybe something ended up in the log, and various other sort of report stuff. The last tab is a faster one. It's just help. Different modules can offer different help pages or links to take you to other tutorials to explain how they work. And usually it's found in here. Many years ago, I'd say like your results may vary, but the help system has actually gotten a decent amount of work, and a lot of it is surprisingly good. So like, yeah, if you don't know what you're doing, help actually could probably take you there. All right, so let's talk a bit more about doing stuff with Drupal. So using Drupal for content management. Drupal has a bunch of things it calls entities, well, content entities, which are the top level devices it calls for just how different kinds of stuff that store content. The most common one of these are what are called nodes or content, and content types. You can have different types of nodes, different content types, and these are what make up most of your pages. They have a bunch of built-in features. They have a page. They record authoring information. They have a bunch of flags on them: sticky, published, promote to front page. There's a node page that sort of lists teasers of all of them that comes by default. And they can have comments on them, so you can enable commenting. But most of your content is going to be nodes. Another kind of piece of content you can turn on is comments. So comments have their own system. They are their own system for creating them. Usually people with lesser access are going to be the ones who are allowed to create comments. They need to be bound to a node generally. They come with their own moderation system so that you can say whether this comment is visible to other people or just admins, because it's comments. They can be threaded and things like that. And you can manage them as their own thing. The next sort of piece of content that you'll see are taxonomy terms. And these are used for classifying other pieces of content. So whether that is going to be the category something is in, or like what location it's in, you can use them to have dynamic lists of things that's to group other things together. Another common block, another piece that you'll see in Drupal are blocks. When Drupal renders things onto a page, the theme gives it different areas you can put things in. And usually when you have content like a node, it just goes into the main area. What blocks let you do is make positional content that go on every page. So let's say you want to have a sidebar that has some information in it, or a footer that has your contact info. You can create a block and then tell Drupal, this always goes on the bottom. And then it's always on the bottom of every page. And custom blocks or content blocks are how those pieces of information are stored. And users are content too, but they have their own abilities. They can log in, they have permissions, they have roles, and it's usually how people interact with Drupal. We've got media. There's so much. Media are wrappers around files. So you can store metadata about files. Images have sort of alt tags and titles and things like that. Documents have different metadata. Videos have different metadata. And to store your different kinds of media and the metadata you want to keep with it, there's media. And there's files, which are actually, the files you're storing. All right. Menus. You can have different menus, and the menu items are different pieces of content that you can have. So you can dynamically create menus to build out the menu system that you need for your application. All right, and there's many more. I even had slides for so many. But with contributed modules, you can download other kinds of content just to store different kinds of things as you may need it. So it's all well and good to have those different kinds of content, but how do you make them different? How do you actually use them? And so the thing about all those different kinds of content is they can have fields. So they're fieldable. Fields are what store the individual chunks of data. There's 4 important concepts to understand with a field. It's type, cardinality, and then a widget, and a formatter. So the field type is pretty simple. It's like, what's the data actually being stored? So if you have sort of a node type that has, and you want to store a date in this particular node type, then you could use a number field and say this stores an integer, or I guess if it's a date, you should actually use a date. But if you're just storing the year, maybe it's a number. Maybe it makes sense. Or if it's some sort of other thing, like an event, and it has an email contact address, you'd have an email field. So the type controls the kind of data that you're storing. The cardinality is how many times that field stores that data. So if you had a content type that was presentation, and it had presenter, and it was, let's say an email address field, by itself, if it has a cardinality of 1, it means that only allows you to have 1 presenter. But you could say, it has a cardinality of 2. You have to have exactly 2 presenters. Or you could say it has as many as you want. It has infinite, and then people just add as many presenters as they want to that field. So cardinality is just the number of values that field has. Then widget, it has a funny name, but it's controlled on the form of that piece of content. So the form is what you see when you're editing it. So when you're editing a number, number's a bad example. Maybe, how about a color? Color field is always interesting because they have the best widgets. The widget is what you see when you're editing that color. Is it just a text box where you type in a hex code? Is it a button that clicks and then you get a color palette and you select it from there? Those are the widgets. How you interact with that data, how you collect that data, how you modify that data. And different kinds of data can have different ways that you want to provide your user to edit it. Sometimes it makes sense, sometimes it doesn't. If you have a list of things, are you giving them checkboxes? Are you giving them a select box? Are you giving them a multi-select box? That is the widget. And then formatter is on the other side. When Drupal is rendering this data for somebody, how does it look? How are you rendering it? And that's the formatter. So if you have a date field, and on the form, the widget, let's say it was a calendar pop-up, but on the front end, as it renders the field, Drupal has it as a date. So on the front end, we control what format does that date render. Is it only the date? Is it a long date? Is it an HTML date? What time zone is it in? Do you use the user's time zone? Do you use the site's time zone? Do we detect a time zone? Do we set to a different kind of format? Do we just tell them the day of the week? All of that is configured on the front end when it's rendering. The other thing, so we sort of talked about you have the two different ways, the forms and the displays. The other thing in Drupal is you can have multiple of those. So you can have multiple forms for a single piece of content. Where that is used is for users. You have two forms to edit a user. By default, with Drupal out of the box, you have the user registration form. So if a user is going to your site and being like, I would like an account, they see a different form than the user who is logged in and says, I need to change some of my user settings. I'm going to edit myself and edit the user. Two different ways of editing the same piece of content. On the other side of that, you can have multiple displays for the same piece of content. So piece of content could be looked at different ways. The default way you get for this is that nodes have a default view. What do you get when you go to the node page? And they have a teaser view. What do you see when you just see it as a list of things, a list of links? And so what's actually on that? So you be a shorter version. It doesn't show the whole content, just the teaser version. And you can set up as many forms and as many displays as you need to do whatever it is you're doing in Drupal. So if you wanted to have displays on content for how they look in search results versus how you're on the page, you can have different displays for all of those and then use them where appropriate. So if I'm looking at this piece of content and it's showing up in a search results list, it renders these fields this way and not these fields or whatever you're doing. If I'm looking at on this page in this way, if it's embedded even in another piece of content, it looks like this. And that lets you manage that. All right, so let's see. Yes, we're just about perfectly on time. So that wraps up sort of the overall arching of what Drupal is, how you use it for content management. So are there any questions? Nobody had questions while it was going on, so. Yeah, what's up?
Yeah, I was trying to build the actual structure, main structure, with the web pages and everything. But at this point, I was just trying to figure out if we should start with taxonomy or menus.
If you're going to start with.
We have full choices, but.
Yes. So taxonomy. Oh, are you trying to build your site structure and deciding? So that is a good question. It depends on like the functionality that you want to have with the users. So are your menus dynamic? Do they change a lot? Because most of the time, if they don't change, you're just going to set like one menu for things. You might use them for taxonomy if the different menu items were going to like content was being classified into different groups by the menu. But at the same time, you're probably going to have an easier time just having, if you're doing that, then is your taxonomy that's classifying the content changing that much? So you might be better off having your menu links go to the taxonomy pages of that, or the pages that show the different kinds of taxonomy. Or if you want to get really complicated, the views page that looks at what the argument is and then does the right thing. But
so I know taxonomy, you can change the substructure anytime.
Yeah.
Placing, like parents and children from taxonomy. But I was just saying, if you're creating a collection, is it better off starting with taxonomy or just building up the menu apart?
I think at that point you really want to figure out the information model like in content strategy you're going to go with for the site, because there's many different ways of implementing everything in Drupal. It's very flexible, and so you can definitely do it either way. You just might end up with an awkward experience at the end for your users who are filling out the content depending on what you're doing. So I think there's a lot of value in really designing the way that like the content authors, the people who are going to use the site every day to write things, go sort of spending from their shoes and being like, what is the workflow that makes most sense for them, that has them doing the least amount of things every time they want to do things, and then sort of mapping it together about what tools they'll need and what pages they need to go to. And if it turns out like, well, if we do it this way, they need to like create 3 things to do the thing they do every day, then maybe that's not a good solution. We'll just have it sort of streamlined so it does, they only need to do it all on one page. And like if there's like a taxonomy that manages it all, then they just create the node, tag it with what they need, and then they're done. So yeah, it depends on what you're doing, I suppose. It's the only answer you get from experts, right? It depends. Sure.
So a bit of a follow-up to that, how would you then take your customer client approach when you work with clients to essentially build up their website?
Well, yeah, you need to know sort of what the like end goal is and who's doing what, and then sort of try and remove the barriers from the people who are, doing that, so they do the least amount of things. Because one of the nice things about having a content management system and having Drupal is you get to know a lot of stuff. Like the system knows a lot of stuff, and so you don't have to you can reduce the number of questions that you ask the users. So if somebody's trying to create content, you can really reduce the number of questions you have to ask them about that content to make it do the thing. And it just means there's sort of more work setting it up. But the fewer things you have to ask them, the less stuff they have to do and remember. And it makes creating the content and using the system much easier. So it's sort of figuring out like what the day-to-day looks like, what the end goal of that is, and then try and like reduce like that workload. And then you end up with the most streamlined system, and things magically just sort of align into the right spots. Yeah. I don't think anyone else has a question, right? All right.
Okay, so
No, you're good. Nobody else had questions. Or everyone loves this, so we're, yeah.
Just a bit of a follow-up question. Do you have any general like user experience tips that you learned from past experience?
So many. All right, if you want user experience tips, all right, hold on. YouTube, DrupalCamp. Oh, what is that presentation called? It's the one about ska. No. Anyways, so a few years ago, I did at maybe it was the last DrupalCamp, we did a presentation about building really good user experience. It was a hybrid presentation I did with a colleague of mine about content strategy and then implementing your content strategy guide inside of Drupal. And the whole thing was about user experience. And our killer feature at the end was just help text. But we talk a lot about how to think about it from the user perspective, how to follow along, and how to sort of implement, because the goal of it was how do you implement your content style guide inside your content management system. So you're going to have content authors write content that follows your content style guide. And I will find that one for you. Just not going to have everyone watch me go on YouTube for a few minutes and look for, and Google myself. Yeah. Yes? Okay, so, geez, do I turn off the recording for my answer to this? Okay, So I'm going to preempt this by understand who you're asking. I'm a Drupal vendor, so I only see the Drupal. So a lot of people, there is a big adoption rate for Drupal in government. Actually, who here is from a federal government organization? All right. Maybe that'll be my answer, because that's a much better one. From what I've been able to glean, there was, we'll call it dissatisfaction with Adobe Experience Manager. And so a lot of people have been looking for something else. And there's been an enormous amount of work in the federal government on Drupal, from inside the federal government, from groups like me and Open Plus, to sort of build pathways and solutions. But most of the work has been done inside the federal government on different things. And so the tools are all there in open source, so it has made an easy pathway. So I think, yeah, a lot of people. Hey.
Maybe I can just add to that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
So I'm at Open Plus. You do almost exclusively representative work. What I'll say that Dave knows, but what I'll say is that the operate really, really gone up, and most of the departments that we work with start small. So we'll start at say it's not public facing, it's not a big commitment, it's internal, but we moved a number of very large agencies over to people, and we're close to. So I mean you can tell here how many people.
That was great. I had no idea.
It's amazing that I would say 75%, maybe more, 95%. So I mean that goes to show you how much interest there is. But I can tell you that the sort of the subjective is
Yeah. Yeah, because I'd say it's really hard to get a percentage, because there's so many websites in the federal government. It is and it's not like a thing that is one thing. It's a million different things that all do a million tiny things, and every one of those things is just some sort of bureaucracy with their own set of forms. And you need a lot of websites if you're going to push that on the internet. And so there's so many websites. But I'll absolutely agree. The momentum is there, and that's what we can measure. Because I don't know if anyone can know how many web pages there truly are in the federal government. Just a frightening amount, I'm sure. All right, so I think you guys can go walk around and browse if there are no more questions. Yeah, I'm Dave. You can feel free to stop me and talk, or any of my colleagues over there. I'm sure the Open Plus over there will talk to you too.
which federal departments don't use Drupal?
Which federal? But I don't know all the federal departments and agencies and extended organizations. It might be a shorter list, you're right. So, yeah, there's a lot of people doing a lot of stuff.
There's some silent ones too, like C-section. Nobody talks about those.
But you're not supposed to talk about them, Joseph. Okay, so I think there's a desire to everyone to go and talk to each other. So yes, we'll be doing the original opening shortly and the keynote. So I'll stop talking and let you guys have a look around. So thank you very much, and welcome to DrupalCamp.